My practice works from a small outbuilding in my garden, where we incorporated many of the design principles that we would like clients to use. It's a renovated building, so the orientation isn't ideal, but we try to adapt it. And starting 15 years ago, the practice has now grown to about 11 people, 12 people, 9 of us are technical, and a friend of mine who shares our office space and sometimes works with us on projects. So when I say we, it's not the royal we, please, it just means everybody in the office, all of us together. We did the renovations quite slowly. We changed things, mixed old and new, planted a lot of trees. I feel that the principle of biodiversity is equally valid in design as in nature. As complex working ecosystems are more sound than a suburban lawn, for instance, so functionally active and evolving spaces are better than the frozen minimalism that looks so beautiful in photographs. Like Elena said yesterday, it's not just about the pretty, it's sometimes about the gritty. I love that. Our drawing studio looks out onto the tree canopy and the balconies for private conversations. We've got bird feeders. We run on solar power and we use Windhoek's recycled water. Please look it up, it's a very interesting story. The city has been recycling its own water since the 1960s. We've got a roof-mounted evaporative cooler because it does get hot, but because of the way the office is designed, we only really need it for about 12 to 16 hours a week during the very hot months, which is about 4 months of the year. Most of our furniture is made from an invasive exotic called Prosopis glandulosa. And I must admit, this is probably not the conventional architect's office that people expect, but it's a kind of place which embraces diversity in an ecological and a cultural sense as well. We won the competition for the Habitat Research and Development Centre in 2002, and that was a major breakthrough. I'm sure most of you have heard me talk about it previously, but for the sake of those who haven't, I just want to run through it very quickly. And over the next few years, we researched sustainable local technologies, materials, and we built a centre where the artificial and the natural, the interior and the exterior interlink continually. The materials were a mixture of recycled and new, alternative and conventional. It was all for testing and demonstration purposes and really to try out what the centre was supposed to do. We incorporated a whole range of passive design principles, and we added some mechanical input to make the buildings perform well, but with a minimum of energy use. The buildings are nestled around a riverbed that follow the existing topography, and we use gabions in the river to slow down the stormwater runoff, and most of the existing trees and shrubs were retained. You can see we sort of curved everything around it. These photographs were taken fairly recently, showing how much things have grown in the meantime, and without irrigation, which is critical. Obviously, in a city with recycled water, irrigation is not such a great idea. This project created a very steep learning curve for us. You know, it was a kind of total immersion thing. And like Kunle said yesterday, we didn't invent anything new. We learned most of it from people that had experience and looking around and so on. You know, when we talk innovation, we're not talking about E equals MC squared. We're talking about taking things that exist and combining them in innovative ways. Addressing the landscape or the cityscape, I consider first crucial step in design. And at the Twyfelfontein Visitor Centre, we used the merging approach to blend in with the landscape to seem a part of it. This is a World Heritage site, Namibia's first, for prehistoric rock engravings. And we used a pared-down palette of materials in forms that were deliberately designed to merge with the landscape. It's basically local rock in diamond mesh gabions, oil drums for the roofs and screens, clay brick floors, and reed ceilings, all on a steel frame construction. It creates a shady refuge for people in a very warm climate, and we placed the building on a already damaged road verge. It was going to be much closer to the rock art. If you can see on the right, it was going to be between these rocks. But walking through it, we realized that there might be rock art submerged under the soil. And we thought we'd rather move it into the verge, which had already been damaged by road construction, so that we were sure that we wouldn't damage anything. It's also reversible. My contention is that whatever we might think is best practice now, in 50 years' time, people might say, oh my God, how could they have done that? So the building can be taken down and all the things can be reused and it won't leave a mark on the landscape. To prepare the visitor mentally for the rock art route, the journey through the building echoes the 3 stages of trance. Archaeologists think that the artist either prepared for making the engravings by going into trance or went into trance as part of the process of making the engravings. And we also designed the accompanying displays to enhance this experience. There's no power, so obviously nothing could be electronic. We couldn't do state-of-the-art technology displays. When we started the project, I phoned people in WITS and people who'd been involved with very prominent archaeological centres and so on. And when I told him our budget was $500,000, the one guy said, but you can't do it for less than $5 million. That's now 8 years ago. And I was completely despondent. And then I spoke to a friend of mine who was a coordinator for the project, and he says, Nina, the South Africans are so often the Americans of our continent. We've done several projects for the Ministry of Environment in national parks, and this one is in the Eyasrichterveld Park on the edge of the Fish River Canyon. It's the 2nd largest canyon in the world, and we had to build a lookout and an ablution block. As you approach the site, this is what you see. It's quite flat landscape, it's nondescript. A lot of people arrive there in the middle of the day and it's hot and it looks like nothing. And then when you get to the edge, this is what you see. To merge as far as possible, we built a low horizontal platform with the ablution semi-underground. At the photograph below, you can see the marquee for the launch, but you can get the idea of what the building looks like. We used minimal materials again. On the top, we've got very light structures that when you approach from a distance, you don't even see it, and the platform is only like a small rise in the landscape. What we wanted to conserve was that sense of surprise, that the canyon is the surprise. The center wasn't intended to overshadow the canyon. And we had to cater for lots of climatic extremes. The wind updraft on the canyon is extreme, and there's a colony of baboons that just rip off everything that they can. So everything is fixed down. The furniture is actually concreted into the ground. And at the ablutions, it's not a manned center. At the ablutions, we've got a lock with a number code. Because the only thing that they haven't yet learned to open is where they have to read to get the code. This is a Nama cultural group that danced at the launch. I believe ordinary people should also have access to the advantages of good design. We've therefore done a number of projects, either pro bono or reduced fee over time. And these projects sometimes allow us more design freedom, but they also present a lot of difficulties. Funding is scant, and generally low skills levels mean on-the-job training, which isn't that easy for an architect who might be 800 kilometers away from the site and get paid for one site visit a month. The low education levels make the inherently lengthy consulting process also very difficult, and reading plans are impossible. So we often make extensive drawings to explain concepts repeatedly or draw during our discussions. But the work is still very fun and interesting and rewarding. At this project, the Webber West Crystal Market, at the top you see the original stalls on the side of the road where people sold crystals. It's the small miners who hand mine things like garnets and so on in the mountains, and then they bring it here and they sell it. It's not always the same people, but it's a whole network of traders and miners. And we decided to create a long horizontal shape that would also sit in the landscape. It's also a very flat plain. Not all of Namibia is flat, but these just happen to be in very flat areas. And the concept was that of a geode, you know, the stone shell, which is lined with crystals. So once you go into the areas, then the stalls are there to protect against the wind. The wind can get hectic, and you can imagine the sand that gets driven with it. And again, the structure merges with the distance. It's cement-free, local natural materials. It uses basic skills, on-the-job training. The tables have lids, so that the vendors can lock away their stones at night instead of packing it up and taking home, which became really onerous. And the people there are very nice. I was trying to take a photograph of a sail, so they enacted one for me, so you can see the guys like really pushing his sail. The users also did their own landscaping. They collected plants from the surroundings very carefully. They didn't exploit, and they brought their own rocks. This was completely their idea. I had no kind of inspiration or idea for landscaping, and I just came there one day and they did it, and I thought it was really, really nice. You know, what people can do on their own when you leave them alone.